Good morning and welcome to Jags AM. I am Brian Sexton, filling in for Kai Stevens. And we have a special guest, someone you probably know very well, who's taking my spot. So let's jump right in with the familiar what we know, big things, and we are going to focus on defense today. Last week we got the opportunity to meet the Jaguars' new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsens. Really interesting guy with a lot of energy. And that's what you expect from a defense, right? Attacking, going forward was his first message. When you've got a pass rush tandem like Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, what better thing to do than chase the quarterback?
We want to be attacking and aggressive in everything that we do. How we fit the run, how we attack blocks, how we play coverage. We want to be a forward-leaning, forward-running, going forward defense. And you're going to say, well, what about in the secondary and backpedaling out of that? But when we make our break, we're coming out of that break to go hit you. And so that's kind of the two things that every day that the players come in, we want to stress. There's some things, fundamental things that tackling, takeaways, ball disruption, and pursuit. And that's what we're going to be about.
Chasing the quarterback. We just introduced you to our special guest, former Jaguars linebacker Tom McManus, all-around good guy broadcaster these days. What'd you think of that thought from him about going and getting the quarterback, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key to the game today, right? You got to disrupt the QB and make sure that timing gets off, and he doesn't have all day long to throw. So going forward, attacking, dictating what the defense is going to do against that offense, I love all of it.
Well, it's not surprising, as you said, Brian, to hear a defense coordinator talk about being aggressive. I always joke I want to meet the first one that's not aggressive. Yeah. But, you like the way he stands in front of a room. You like the way he can lead. You like the way he can set a tone. In terms of chasing the quarterback, I think the good news for him, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen, in addition to being really good pass rushers last year, they're always consistent against the run overall players. So he can attack, but he's got two guys there to build around who fill into that philosophy, but they're overall players. And I think that's what he's going to like more than anything.
Yeah, it sure helps him to lean into the fact that Walker and Allen were the best duo in the NFL last year at attacking the quarterback with 27.5 sacks. Well, look, this is a young defensive coordinator, a guy who has been around the block both in college and the NFL, and he had a lot of opportunities, but he chose the Jaguars, and he told us why he thought this was the right place for him.
It's so important that you work with good people, and we're so close in this thing, and we spend so many hours a day away from our families with these men in here, and you want to be around good people. And so that was the first thing. And then Trent, you hear the same things, and so you start working your way down. Mr. Khan, the owner, I mean, what's the organization about? How is the owner? And then didn't know that they built the facility, and then you start doing the roster research, and you kind of know a little bit, but then as you start digging into this thing, you're like, you know what? This is a great place. This is a place that we want to bring our family to and be a part of. This is a place that we want to help take the next step.
John, the way that last season ended, folks aren't necessarily feeling that energized and enthusiastic right now about this football team. They have more questions than they think they have answers. But when you get an outside guy like Nielsen who comes in here and takes a fresh look and sees the talent, the building, as he mentioned, this is an attractive job for anybody that joins this staff for a number of reasons.
Well, it should be. I mean, they were 8-3 last year, the Jaguars, and they finished 9-8. So that cast a pall over everything. But remember, they were 9-8, which means as a defensive coordinator, if he comes in and gives them 2 more wins, I know it doesn't work that way, but he has to be looking at it like, all I need to do is get them a little bit better. I would think he's also looking at the roster thinking, I've got Trayvon Walker, I've got Josh Allen, I've got Devon Hamilton, who was really good before the injury, I've got Foye Oluokun, I've got Tyson Campbell. This is not your 2013 Jaguars where there's no talent anywhere. I think he looks at it and says, I've got some pieces. If I add a couple of more, Tom, I would think this is something you can work with.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think on the outside, John and Brian, they have the talent to get it done. I agree with you on Devon Hamilton. I don't know if I like him as that 3-4 nose, but if he can stay healthy and stay low, he can help a ton. But look, you look at even the safeties, John. You got Cisco, you got Jenkins, you got Antonio Johnson. You mentioned Campbell, so the back end's strong. The backers are strong. We know that. We need a little more beef up front, and you can work with that. And I think it's all upside from Coach Nielsen's perspective.
Well, we have Tom here today, so obviously our focus is on defense, and there's plenty to talk about. Let's go with our final big thing, and that is influences. Look, when you get a coach, you get the sum total of all the experience he's had and all the lessons he's learned from the coaches that he played for and coached with, both in college and the pros. And Ryan Nielsens was asked last week about his influences. Who were the men who made the strongest impression on him and that we will see in his schemes on Sunday afternoons?
Have been very blessed in that. Have been around Monty Kiffin and Norm Chow, Alex Gibbs, like all these guys over the years. And just, when I was a younger coach, I really didn't, understand at the time. I was so young, kind of all the knowledge that when we were at Ole Miss and these guys were coming in, Oehser was the head coach, and that, man, it was just a football education. And you kind of really didn't until years later. You went back in your notes and you're like, man, you're very fortunate to be at a place at that time.
So, Tom, the coach comes in, he's got a new scheme, right? And the players don't necessarily know it at this point. As a player who went from a couple of different coordinators, what's the hardest part for these players now? The expectation of what they'll be asked to do or learning new language? What's the hardest part about coming with a new coordinator?
It's adjusting to the new terminology for sure. You just got to rememorize. That's all. You just got to get in the books and study it. Most of the things that defenses are doing today, they all do. All teams do, a variation of pretty much everything that everybody else does. But yeah, it's really that terminology and understanding exactly what Coach Nielsen is looking for.
You always wonder, Brian, why they don't just have the same language across the board and make it easier on these guys. But everybody's got their own stuff. Look, he has been around good coaches. Monty Kiffin, a lot of cover two. It's hard to know exactly what a guy's going to run because everything changes so much in the NFL. The guys have their basic scheme, but I get questions all the time about scheme, and it changes every year, and you have to adapt to your personnel. I think adapting to the personnel you have here is going to be the key for him, and everything he talked about, he'll be able to do that, Brian.
There are some thoughts from the introductory press conference from Ryan Nielsens last Thursday. When we come back, we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics and issues that he faces as he goes forward as the new defensive coordinator of the Jaguars. All that and more when Jags AM continues.
If you need a ride,
you've got options.
Get a Kia of Orange Park, Nissan of Orange Park, or Southside Kia. And drive away in the vehicle you've had your eye on.
There is something for everyone when you shop with us.
Take your next vehicle home with low financing or payment options available. Plus, we'll buy your vehicle regardless of where you owe. KiaJax.com
or NissanOfOrangePark.com.
Proud members of the Morgan Automotive Group. Call 904-474-9863 for complete detail.
And that's a Magellan first down.
Move the freight, move the freight, move the freight.
Would you like to control your own income? Work at Magellan Transport. Voted the coolest office space in Duval. Bring your talents and let your career flourish. Visit their website at MagellanLogistics.com and apply online. Trust service. Trust Magellan.
I'm John Davis, Secretary of the Florida Lottery, and I'm proud to lead an agency that is creating brighter futures for Florida students, families, and communities. As the primary funding source of the Bright Future Scholarship Program, the lottery has helped nearly 1 million students reach their dream of a post-secondary education. And we will continue to do our part to ensure that every student across this state is aware of these opportunities and has the resources needed to succeed. Because together, we can build a brighter future for all.
Welcome back to Jags AM on a Tuesday morning in Jacksonville. And by the way, folks, if you're ready to help the Jaguars lock down the bank in 2024, you can be first in line to select your seats for next season by placing your deposit now. Catch all the biggest matchups and don't miss a single moment by placing your deposit at jaguars.com/tickets, or you can call the folks in the ticketing office, 904-633-2000. Tell them John Oehser told you to call. All right, we are rolling right along. We were just talking about the different schemes and influences that a defensive coordinator brings in. You know, he talked about Monty Kiffin, and the first thing that pops into my mind, guys, when I hear Monty Kiffin is Tampa 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And do you expect with the talent that he's got here? Explain what the Tampa 2 is.
Well, the Tampa 2's coverage is cover 2, which is usually press corners with, corner on each half, right? So you cut it in 2 for the most part on the back end. But the old Monty Kiffin was, we stopped the run on the way to the quarterback. So that's interesting. You know, the going forward comment, moving forward, dictating, that may make some sense. Now, do we have the personnel? I don't know. Do we have a Warren Sapp type on the team right now? Do we have a Booger McFarland? You know what I mean? Do we, if we're going to run that 4-3 cover 2, do we have those pieces in place?
By type, do you mean Hall of Fame type like Warren Sapp?
Just disruptive type. You know, look, I've said this for a long time. I think Devon Hamilton would be a tremendous 3 technique in a 4-3. Put him on a guard where he's not getting banged by 2 guys. You know, when you're a 3-4 nose, you're getting hit by the guard, the center, every single play. Put him one-on-one for some plays against that guard. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah, the key with Tampa, too, also is don't like to blitz a whole lot. You assume that your 4-man rush can get there. I don't know exactly what front he'll use. The fronts have changed so much in terms back in the old Tampa 2, you had 4 and you played 7 back. Now everybody's doing hybrid so much that it's not really like that anymore. But they've got 2 guys on the edge who can disrupt the quarterback.
Well, let's hear more from Ryan Nielsens from his news conference last week. And in particular, he talked about some of the things that the Jags did well. One of them was taking the ball away. And when the Jaguars were winning last year, guys, the Jaguars defense was piling them up near the top of the league. He couldn't miss it when he turned on the tape.
We want to be an attacking, aggressive style of defense that runs to the ball, that goes and hunts the ball, and just put the pressure on the offense. That's just what that we feel that we can bring. That's just the style that we want to play. And so we feel that, when we talk to Coach Peterson and, compliments what we're doing on offense, and we want to be very complimentary to the other side of the ball and get them the ball as much as possible. And Trevor, and because they've got a lot of talent over there and they're very good. And so, look, we just want to do our job and get the ball back to them as many times as possible. And when we do that, we'll win a lot of games.
I think the key is this team is set up and to score and be an offensive team. Ideally, Ryan Nielsen does not have to come in and have this be a top 5 defense to be great. I'm not saying you should grade him on a curve or whatever, but the defense overall until the very end of the season played well enough. I think what he said is exactly right. If they break serve a couple times, I always use that analogy. If this defense gets 2 turnovers a game and just doesn't give up, just get waylaid everywhere else, the offense is supposed to do enough to work with that. So I definitely think he can come in, be a turnover-oriented team, get the 27 or 28 that they've been doing in the last couple of years, stop the run a little better all season. I'm not going to say his job isn't hard, but I think it's an attainable goal to be a good enough defense if the offense improves.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me it's more the accountability. It's more like, when you screw up, you got to be held accountable. There were too many miscues last year on defense, too many missed assignments. I think when they were doing well, consistent pressure, because that you can be aggressive in your coverage, you can attack the ball a little bit more. And one thing I noticed, because I take stats all throughout the year, third down was very good all year long for this defense. They got off the field on third down. Granted, our offense wasn't very good, so that didn't help. Takeaways were phenomenal. Yards per carry against were very good early and through the middle. And then all of a sudden, it went from 3.6 to 3.8 yards per carry to 4 to 4.2, and you could just see that was happening throughout the. And you can't look. We all want to hit the quarterback. We all want to disrupt that. And all that. But at the end of the day, you got to stop the run. At least control the run where it doesn't control you and taking time off the clock, and you can't get off the field.
I'm sure you have a thought on what you watched on tape as to what happened and why that number kept climbing.
I think it was attitude. I really do. And look, I think it happened in Philly too. you get up here, you're the number 1 seed. Maybe you don't put in that extra effort. Maybe you don't hit the weights that much. Maybe you're not studying as much. Maybe you think you're just talented enough to show up. Well, guess what? The offensive coordinator on the other side, he's studying you, dissecting you, finding your weakness, and he'll find it if you allow it to show up. So I think it's more mental, more attitude.
Right.
I think they've had enough talent in 2023 to be a contender, but you got to be on point. You can't have giveaways, and you can't be having missed assignments.
Yeah, the run defense has to get better. The pass rush is the thing that they were able to hang their hats on, especially late in the season, as Trayvon Walker was coming on to complement Josh Allen, and the new defensive coordinator certainly noticed that when he turned on the tape.
I think that we're talented. We've got a talented group. We've got some really good players, and that's what was exciting and attracted us about the job here. But look, talent only gets you so far, right? And so we're really excited to get to work with these guys. They seem very eager. You try to reach out, just introductions. Hello, how you doing? Introduce yourself, things like that, and the staff. And the guys seem very eager and to get going.
I want to ask the former linebacker question. First of all, in terms of accountability, that was the problem when you played. The coach didn't hold anybody accountable.
Yeah, right. I was scared to death to go into meetings. You kidding me?
But
that's funny.
You mentioned the run defense.
Yep.
So much, you always hear about, you have mentioned to me maybe off the air today, it's got to be a little simpler on defense. With so much at the end of the season about jumping out of gaps, which I think was a big problem too, how much simpler can you make playing the run? Is that something that can be done, and do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, no, I think the fronts they're pretty simple. I think with the coverages can get complex, where you're going from zone to man, whatever you're doing out there. So I don't think the fronts, gap integrity, I hear that. A lot of times gap integrity, you're getting moved out of your gap. They're just taking you and moving you. Doesn't happen all the time, but it happened too much last year. And I know as a former backer, look, you can't play the run when your D linemen are getting pushed back. Right. You just can't. Whether it's a yard, 2 yards, if they're in your lap, now you got to guess. Now you got to, try to, if you can't see the back. I remember Ben Coleman in practice used to come out. He was like, he eclipsed the sun. I couldn't see anybody. You'd have to look around him, but in a game, you got to make a decision. If you jump in the wrong, then they go to the other side. You know what I mean? But it all starts up front. And if that defensive line, as a general, the interior guys can just hold, serve, if you will. Not, hey, I want you to disrupt. But if you don't disrupt, let my outside guys disrupt. Just stand there. Don't get pushed back into my backers and my safeties, and we'll have a chance to be better against them.
All right, you mentioned man versus zone. John, I know you've been getting questions in the O zone about philosophy and which one better fits the Jags. Which one will Ryan Nielsen use? It was one of the first questions he was asked last week.
As one of our coaches would like to say, nothing cheap and nothing deep. And so when you're press, you take away the quick game. And we like to play shell, which everybody, when you look at us, we, take away the deep throws. It may look man or man-ish at times, but sometimes there's some press bail and some nuances in the coverage of that. It actually is zone with tighter coverage outside. And so it's actually good that you see it like that, because if we're viewed like that, then we drop into zone. It could be advantageous for us on defense.
John, do you see the defensive backfield as being a first-round need for this team? I know we see some mock drafts that have them taking a cornerback. There are a couple of good ones that fit where they are in the middle of the first round. Do you think it's that critical, or can they win with what they've got right now and keep developing young talent?
Well, I don't know that it's – I look at the draft a little differently. I try to look at it through a GM's eyes. I don't think it's a first-round need in 2024, but I think it's a first-round need at some point over the next 2 years, and you might draft it in 24 knowing it's going to be a need, meaning Tyson Campbell and Darius Williams are both in the last year of their contract. I don't know that realistically you're not going to re-sign 2 corners to big money. So if there's somebody there at 17 who makes sense and you can move into the nickel and be really, really strong for a year, then move them out. So I think it's a first – you've got to address it at some point. And if the right guy's there, then I think you take it this year. I guess I would say it wouldn't bother me if they did it, because you're strengthening an area that has to be strong over the long term. But I could see how they could say, well, it's not there right now. We have to wait till next year. not avoiding the question. I just think that's how they'll look at it.
Well, we spend so much time talking about big guys, right? I mean, this team needs more big physical guys on both sides of the line. We've talked about that since this show began. However, in today's game, the way that it's played, you've got to have those corners that you can put out there and say, that's your guy.
Oh, without a doubt. But look, I think Tyson Campbell is the guy. That injury bothered him. And look, if a soft tissue injury doesn't heal, you can't open the gate. And as a corner, you can't open your gate. You're going to be off coverage. So, again, I'm more of a believer. And by the way, when you play that Tampa 2 or that cover 2 press, it's like, man, you're going to release him eventually, but during your zone, you are glued to that player until he gets out of your zone. Happens for linebackers, too. If the tight end runs up the field, you got to carry him. He's your guy for the rest of that play. So there is some zone principles. But, look, I think it does start up front. But if you are going to play that press, your corners got to be able to press. And what does that mean? Getting their hands on that wide receiver, not letting them off the line of scrimmage freely, and disrupting that timing between him and the quarterback.
All right, well, the Combine begins next week. John will be there covering it for us, and so we'll turn our attention to what the Jaguars might be focusing on next week, and we'll also get caught up on what Tommy Mack's up to these days in his broadcasting career. You're watching Jags AM, and we're back with more right after this.
If you need a ride,
You've got options.
get a Kia of Orange Park, Nissan of Orange Park, or Southside Kia, and drive away in the vehicle you've had your eye on.
There is something for everyone when you shop with us.
Take your next vehicle home with low financing or payment options available. Plus, we'll buy your vehicle regardless of where you owe. KiaJax.com.
Or NissanofOrangePark.com.
Proud members of the Morgan Automotive Group. Call 904-474-9863 for complete details.
Jaguars fans are gearing up and saving big at Fanatics.com, the world's largest collection of officially licensed fan gear from all the leagues, teams, and Jaguars players you love. Shop the most trusted brands, exclusive designs by Fanatics, and autographed collectibles from today's biggest stars. Join Fanatics Rewards today and earn fan cash on every purchase. Shop now and get today's special offer. Fanatics.com, officially licensed everything.
Want to get your hands on the next big thing? At Verizon, new and existing customers can trade in their old Samsung phone, any model, in any condition, and get the new Samsung Galaxy S24 Plus with Galaxy AI on us, with select unlimited plans. A better plan to save is Verizon. $999.99 device payment or a full retail purchase with new or upgrade smartphone line on unlimited ultimate or select 5G unlimited plan required. Less $1,000 trade-in/promo credit applied over 36 months. Promo credit ends if eligibility requirements are no longer met. 0% APR.
We're back on Jags AM. Brian Sexton along with John Oehser and longtime Jags linebacker Tom McManus.
I've got a question for the former player. Usually it's you, me, and Kai. We didn't play football. I mean, you played
High
football.
school, sure.
Big sack in the state championship game. He never mentions that. But
That's great.
I really don't.
You mentioned Tyson Campbell. And so many injuries at the end of last year. And fans hate hearing about injuries, but Trevor Lawrence playing through at the end of last year. I know you can't judge. You can't get inside players. But how much do injuries, when you're trying to play through, is it realistic to think they're just not going to affect? I mean, there's guys who can play and play effectively. But as a player, when you're playing through that, how difficult, when you look at players, how much do you factor that in of, okay, that guy is trying to play through something?
It depends on the injury, right? Like if it's a hamstring tear, that's going to be tough to come back from. If you tore your bicep, from your shoulder, you know what I mean? But you can still play, maybe a factor that do you have the strength to punch? Do you have the strength to get your hands on people? So it really depends. I mean, but here's the thing, and I know maybe today's day and age they can't do it, but our backups back in the day could play. I mean, we might not have been superstar guys, but if the starter went down, the backup came in and you almost didn't miss a beat. So where's that depth when that those injuries do occur? Because they're gonna occur. Mm-hmm. They always occur. But you better make sure you got someone that could jump into that role and at least fill the rim, up to the rim as close as they can.
Well, back when you were playing also, I mean, you had Brian Schwartz and Brant Boyer and Kevin Hardy, and then he had Ty Halleck. And people might forget that Ty Halleck was playing fullback, tight end, and linebacker.
Yeah.
And when you got hurt, he had to jump onto the other side of the ball.
That's right.
And play.
Absolutely.
Guys have to be
Versatile. Yeah, no doubt. But it depends, to back your question,
sure.
It depends on the injury. I mean, look, I don't want to go too old school with the difference between pain and injury, right? You know?
Right.
But there are, look, I wonder, like, if Brandon Sheriff was just so banged up that
Right.
Look, if you've ever had really bad pain, it weakens the muscle. I mean, I've had the torn biceps, all that. It'll just weaken it. Like, you don't have the same, power and explosion as if you have. But again, it depends on the severity of the injury and what the injury is.
And your instinct is to play through. I mean, you had Trevor playing 5 games last year through injuries every time. You got to be out there, but at some point, it's got to affect your level as well. And I guess that's the, that's why you play the games.
I think for most players, you find out all you can on the injury front. Can I make it worse?
Right.
And if I can't make it worse, can I handle the pain? If I can handle the pain, I'm playing no matter what.
All right, what are you up to these days? I see the horse's mouth. I know you're doing some of that.
Yeah, it's TV
and are you
shows.
the horse's mouth?
Yeah. Well, straight from the
playoff?
horse's mouth.
Right.
So like you get a chance to sit at my bar. I'm a bartender at Tommy Mac's. It's a makeshift bar in San Marco. And you get to tell your story, which is great. So it doesn't cost you anything to show up. You sit at my bar. We have a beer, water, coffee, whatever, even whiskey if you want. It's up to you. And we talk about what you're doing in our community. And I love that show because we do military entrepreneurs, philanthropists, C-level executives, sports people. You're on, Dave Camp. I mean, it's just a good variety of a show. I also do a podcast called Catching Up with Tommy Mac on 1010XL's podcast platform. I do that twice a week. That's really just me talking about the Jags. More of an editorial. I read and react, kind of like you're supposed to as a backer.
You react.
I'm trying. But
are you ever animated, or are you always just subtle?
No. You know how I am. I get excited, man. I love talking about ball.
John, a couple weeks ago, we were out at a burger place.
Graffiti
at
Burger
the
Bar, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kevin Hardy was there. There were a bunch of former players. Pete Mitchell was there. That's a Facebook thing that you're working on?
That was a new show. It was called Tommy Mac's Happy Hour. So we did it at the Graffiti Burger Bar in Jax Beach, and we did it pretty much all season long. Aaron Beasley, Killer Bees, my co-host, and then we bring on guests like you were there every single week. And that show you were on, the last one, that was the finale of season 1. Season 2 is coming up in about 2-3 weeks.
And as you're just in the bar, you're going to go behind the scenes and follow Beasley somewhere doing something.
With that guy, you got to follow him around because he's got a ton going on, and he brings a lot of just great charisma and knowledge, and he's one of my good buddies. So I love having him on the show.
It was all a bunch of former Jags from the early days. It was a nostalgia fest, John.
Yeah, it was
well,
great.
and guys stay, and I'm sure for you, Tom, that's a great thing, and you're probably used to it by now because you've been in Jacksonville. Doesn't happen everywhere, but so many guys stay that I'm sure it's a great community for you guys.
Look, and I've said this to Brian, that's why I love Jacksonville so much. It was more than just playing for the Jags, although that got me here. I met my wife here. I live here. I've lived here longer than I've ever lived anywhere else. I love Chicago, where I'm from. I loved when I spent my time in Boston, but I've been in Jacksonville for almost, 25 years now, if not long, 28 years, I think it is. And it's a great community. I love the people. I love the fans. I love the teams here. And for me to be able to go out there and talk about what I love talking about, in the place that I played, it's fantastic.
You showed up in Jacksonville 29 years ago.
29.
One more thing you mentioned to me last week when we were having coffee. You're starting to work again on a documentary idea about the book you wrote about your father, who was shot down during World War II and was part of a dramatic experience in a prison camp.
Yeah, all at the age of 23, 24. He was playing football at Rutgers, and the day after Pearl Harbor, he left Rutgers and joined the Army Air Corps, learned to fly the B-24 bomber, eventually got his crew, and on their 23rd mission, they were shot down headed to Munich, and he spent 11 months in a prison war camp, various ones. They had to move him a couple times because the end of the war was coming, and liberated by General Patton's 3rd Armored Division. Came home and went back to Rutgers, played leather helmet football for 2 more years, and his last game, I'm very proud to say this, my dad's last football game he was a member of the Eastern College All-Stars. They played the New York Giants in the Polo Grounds in 1947. Doc Blanchard was his teammate, and so was Ernie Davis, and they got a nice photo of him and an article that talks about my dad and Doc Blanchard and
Davis.
Davis.
Very cool.
It's really pretty
It's
awesome.
a great book. What was the name of it?
We'll Always Be Pals, the last words of a dying father and a true hero. Literally the last words my dad said to me before he died of cancer. Him and I were really close. We were 50 years apart, but best friends. And I got a chance to say goodbye, though, man. I really appreciated being able to say, I love you, thank you, I'll take care of Ma, kissed him goodbye, hugged him goodbye, and that was the last moment I had with him before he died.
We'll always be pals. Check it out. I read it years ago. We did a story on TV about it, and hopefully a documentary is forthcoming. When we come back, we'll get a couple thoughts on what John's looking at the Combine next week and wrap up this edition with Tommy Mack as our special guest. You're watching Jags AM.
If you need a ride,
you've got options.
Get a Kia of Orange Park, Nissan of Orange Park with Southside Kia. And drive away in the vehicle you've had your eye on.
There is something for everyone when you shop with us.
Take your next vehicle home with low financing or payment options available. Plus, we'll buy your vehicle regardless of what you owe. KiaJax.com
or NissanofOrangePark.com.
Proud members of the Morgan Automotive Group. Call 904-474-9863 for complete detail.
I'm John Davis, Secretary of the Florida Lottery, and I'm proud to lead an agency that is creating brighter futures for Florida students, families, and communities. As the primary funding source of the Bright Future Scholarship Program, the lottery has helped nearly 1 million students reach their dream of a post-secondary education. And we will continue to do our part to ensure that every student across this state is aware of these opportunities and has the resources needed to succeed. Because together, we can build a brighter future for all.
Frank Frangie here. When you want barbecue in Jacksonville, you want Bono's Pit Barbecue. You can find Bono's locations all around town and on game day at Everbank Stadium because Bono's is the official barbecue of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Over 70 years of authentic Southern Pit Barbecue. We are the local barbecue joint in BBQval for generations of people in Jacksonville. Go to bonosbarbecue.com to learn more or call 904-880-8310 today. And remember, if you don't see a pit, it ain't legit.
We took the family down. We took them down to Disney World, and we were on the Small World. And eventually the slip got granted permission for the slip. And so we're sitting on, and I've got our kids and my wife's on the other end. And we just sat down on the boat and got a text from Coach Peterson, basically said, "Hey, Ryan is coach and would like to talk to you," you know, that type of deal. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, how long is this going to be? Like, I got to make a call, right? And so you don't realize I was on, I can't remember the last time I was on a Small World, but it seemed about a half an hour, that ride, and eventually got off and it worked out.
I remember the last time I was on It's a Small World, and it seemed like a half an hour ride.
Yeah, it seems maybe you're waiting for a job offer or not. So.
It's long no matter what. All right. We mentioned that you're going to Indianapolis. You and JP will have this show next week from Indy, Jags AM, from the NFL Combine next week. Are you going up there with the idea that you're going to specifically look at different groups or players? Where's your attention?
Not as much. I mean, we look at that. Our primary objective covering the Combine is to talk to our guys, meaning Doug and Trent will speak, and you try to glean sort of where the franchise is headed right now, because if you think about it, Trent and Doug have really talked about wrap-up, which is sort of looking back. Yeah. Now they've had some meetings. I don't expect Trent to pull me aside and say, hey, we're drafted. But you get an idea about sort of what they're looking at. They've made a few more decisions. They might hint at a few things that they couldn't hint at 2 or 3 weeks ago. Beyond that, you sort of watch the drills where you can. Quarterback won't be a thing. But, I start to try to get a feel from talking to people about certain draft picks, about certain positions, offensive line, defensive interior, which Tom wants, and I'll be looking at corners as well.
And from your perspective, when you think about the Combine, you go back and what's that like from a player's perspective?
Well, I was never invited to the Combine. My slow ass wasn't invited. I look better in pads than I did without pads. But I do like watching the Combine, and I really like watching the drills because you can see their movement. Look, it's one thing to move on your own. It's another thing to move on command. You know what I mean? Where you got to react and instinctually move. So I love all the positions. I do like watching the QBs throw. I don't put too much stock into it, but I do like to see that release in that arm and see where they place it. But for me, it's all look. And I think it's old cliche. The measurables got to match the tape. And maybe they don't always do, right? So you just got to be really careful what you see out there in the Combine, that it translates to what it does on the football field. You don't want a looks like Tarzan, play like Jane type scenario. If you know what I mean.
That old line.
One thing coaches always look at is even beyond what they're doing on the field. A lot of coaches that have been around like to look at how they're interacting with their group, whether they're leaders or not, whether they're comfortable in that situation. And you do see differences in terms of if a guy's a natural leader. So they're always on display and always being watched at this thing.
If the psyche of a player, you don't know until you get him in.
Right.
You know what I
A
mean?
feel for a guy.
You got to get a good feel for, are they my kind of player, the kind of guy that's got grit, that's going to work, that's going to be able to handle adversity, that's always going to bring his A game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And guys will put on shows in those interviews, right? They're like trying to put their best foot forward, but when you get them in to your facility, to your team, that's when you hope that you hit them on that regard. You may see him on film, looks good on film, looks good in the measurables, but man, I hope he's as tough as he is good on those other two things, if you know what I mean.
Look, you're here, or you're in Indy next week. By the time you're here again, we'll be talking about the start of free agency, which is just 3 weeks away.
Can't wait.
And we still have that, I can tell by the smile. We still have the story of Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley, and hopefully we have some resolution as we get closer to it. Tom, thanks so much for making
Thank
time
you,
to
Brian.
come
It was
and join us
great.
this
Great
morning.
to see you. Thanks, Johnny.
And that'll do it for Jags AM. Again, next Tuesday, the show comes to you live from the Indiana Convention Center, side of the 2024 NFL Combine. JP Shadrick will host. John Oehser will be there. And we'll see you next week on Jags AM.